Hi, my name is TJ. My dad died of overdose on January 1st, 2011, and my mom is a recovering addict. God helped my mom, and now together we are here to help you. Now let's talk recovery. Here's your host, my mom, Susan Sexton-Wood.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Recovery. I'm your host, Susan Sexton-Wood. Today's special guest is Stan McClanahan, and we have with us co-hosting Debbie Lawman. Debbie is the president of Unchained Praise's board, and she spends time with me working in the office, getting us organized. The word for this year is organization. So I want to welcome Debbie and Stan to the show.
Thanks.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great.
We really tried to bring just reality to the talk show. We like to laugh on the show and goof off a little bit, but also we like to be serious because just addiction is running rampant in the world, and people are dying because of the devastation that addiction brings with it. And so Stan is here to share with us his testimony. Stan is a recovering addict, and he does a lot of giving back in the community to help other people not only choose the path of recovery, but he gives his time and dedication to helping families with just some outreach that he does. So Stan, I want to ask you to share your testimony and to just share what your life was maybe before addiction and then how addiction took over.
Okay, well, I grew up in Springfield, Ohio, and I was born and raised in a Christian home. Whenever the church doors were open, I was there. We went 3 times a week, consecutive. I mean, we did not miss church at all. And as far as being a kid growing up, as far as my parents, I had great parents. I've actually, to this day, never seen them argue. So it was a great childhood in the home. As far as outside the home, it was pretty rough because I was bullied when I was younger. Got picked on a lot, and so that kind of just segregate. I started to segregate myself from other people, and really I started to have a kind of a black heart when it came to other people. So as I went to high school and got older, it's just my self-esteem was really, really low. I didn't really have no friends that I hung around with. The only friends I had were from church. Other than that, in high school, I was just pretty much a loner. But other than that, I had a pretty good childhood. At the age of 18, I had my son. I met a girl. We got together and got married at 18 and had my son. And we got married for 2 years, and then we were divorced. I wasn't the responsible type, so I ran the streets, and she just didn't put up with it. And also at 18 is when I tried my first drug. I just smoked marijuana till eventually I got kicked out of the home, my parents' home, for that, and stayed with my uncle, who was a heroin addict and crack addict. And things just took off from there. I tried heroin for the first time there, and 20 years, used for about 20, 21 years, just running the streets and jails. And but that was kind of my life before recovery, homeless and just living on the streets, pretty much stealing and robbing from anybody I could to get my fix. And but yeah, that was my life before recovery.
So what's the first thing that led you toward recovery? A lot of times we can be in active addiction and something could happen that starts our thinking, it starts changing. So if you can remember even somebody just encouraging you.
Yeah, I remember exactly. I was working in Greenville, Ohio with my pastor from Ohio, and we were doing construction, and he also had hired some help who just so happened to be in recovery. He had went through Shepherd's Way here in Indiana when it was a men's program, and I'll never forget it because I was dope sick. I didn't want to be there at work, and he shared his testimony with me, and I want to say a week later, I came to Indiana, and at that point in time, I hadn't had a relationship with my son. I think he was about 10 or 11 years old at that time, so I was already I was ready to do something because my life was just miserable. So, yeah, and that's how I ended up here in Indiana, and then my recovery started from there.
Wow. So if you look at your recovery walk, what kind of things did you do? So you went to Shepherd's Way, which was a facility inpatient for men. And so after that point, kind of what was your life then? And what did you start applying to yourself when it comes to recovery? A lot of times, we're definitely not used to structure.
Right.
You know, we just kind of fly by the seat of our pants every day and do whatever. But we have to learn to build structure and to look at accountability and to be honest. For the most part, honesty is probably number
Right.
one.
When I came here to Shepherd's Way, I stayed 9 months in the program. When I graduated, I actually had almost 5 years clean, and got married in that time and got a home. But the steps I was taking, I was continuing to go to church. I was involved with, at the time it was called
Are you?
Reformers Unanimous.
I read minds.
And so I still was connected with other addicts and continued my relationship, growing in my relationship with God, and also had support. But after Shepherd's Way, I relapsed about 5 years, close to 5 years, and went back to Shepherd's Way probably 3 or 4 more times. And then finally I had enough Shepherd's Way, so I got clean for 2 years and relapsed again, and probably did that 3 or 4 times. Repeated that process. What was amazing and is I think you said, Debbie, earlier, is that like it's amazing. Like I've had my wife this whole time. Me and my wife been together total of 11 years. We've been married 8, and I've only been clean for 4 years with some relapses in there, but she's never left my side, and she's always been there, and just having that support, is just amazing.
So a lot of people relapse in recovery. I really don't like hearing the saying, because there's a saying that says, relapse happens. And I don't think it has to happen with everybody, but for some people it does. And the biggest thing is to learn something each time that it happens. One of the big things that I learned during my kind of back and forth with relapse is I did not have to go back to where I was. And so that's where we look at, again, with recovery and sobriety. And even though we may mess up, it doesn't mean we have to go back to that beginning, to that where we didn't know anything about recovery, where we hadn't worked on ourselves. So we don't have to go back to that beginning. And we can also look at maybe the date changes. And maybe we don't even pay attention to the date, because some people don't even look at the date. And it actually messes them up sometimes by having their date where they know it's another year. And so looking at the recovery and the sobriety is totally different. And so if you can share some of that with what you learned, in your recovery, and then when you messed up, what was the process for you of picking yourself back up? And a big part of figuring out why we relapsed is big, because we don't want to repeat that again. And there's a billion reasons we can relapse.
Right.
But to figure out, why did it happen actually helps us pick ourselves up a little bit faster.
I'd say 4 years ago, that relapse before I got clean, man, I'll never forget it. And through that relapse, I learned that I needed to be completely honest. I had relapsed, and my wife, for the first time in 11 years, actually was like, okay, you got to go. And that kind of shocked me a little bit. So I went and got a hotel, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go detox in a hotel. But that didn't work out. But 2 days later, she came back, and I was just able to be completely honest with her. I just let it all out and was just like, just told her everything. And the freedom from that, from being honest and just cleaning my plate with her, was tremendous help for me. And then at that time, I knew I had to get as far away from Richmond for me to get some help. That way, and the only reason I say as far away is because it wasn't so easy to come home if I'm somewhere far in a treatment center. So I went 6 hours away to Nashville and stayed there for 7 months. And in that program, I learned that it's very important to have a routine as far as Bible reading and prayer, just getting into a good routine. And then some other relapses. This last relapse I had, I learned that I can't fix myself, that I have to share how I feel if I'm struggling, if I'm having a bad day and I want to use, or even migraine or whatever. I got to share that with people, and I just can't just try to stuff it. Keep stuffing it, because sooner or later it's going to catch up with me if I don't share it. So that's something I learned my last relapse, for sure.
And it's definitely important to learn something each time. And we want to hope that relapse never happens. One thing that I just do for myself is to know that I'm not invincible, and I'm not immune to relapse. And I think for myself, just staying humble. And just like you said, talking to someone, God's definitely put a lot of people around me, and sometimes I can feel like I'm going crazy. I mean, literally, I do feel like I'm going crazy sometimes, because just life. When your life is busy and you're doing so many different things, we can sometimes take on too much stuff, and we're not paying attention to how we're feeling. And I've just learned, as soon as I'm feeling something, I just have to call somebody, or I have to talk about it. And that's probably the biggest thing about my recovery. And whether it's to a board member or to other people that God's put in my life, it seems like for everything that happens in my life, I can pick up the phone and he's put on my heart who to call. And so it's not the same person all the time. And it's definitely important. And I think our egos can get in the way sometimes too, especially when you have 4 and 5 years. And, it puts us so far away from that active addiction lifestyle that you almost feel, I'm never going to use again. And I think about that often, that I can't ever see myself doing that again. But again, I have to pull myself in and, okay, Susan, but you're not immune to relapse. So I have to keep working daily on myself just to keep that close, I think.
How much of a struggle? Kind of a stupid question, because of course it's a struggle, but when you do those times when you have relapsed. Did you find yourself like chastising yourself, saying, where am I? Why did I do this? Or whatever. Do you beat yourself up too much? Or, is that an issue?
This last relapse I had before I went to Nashville, I'll never forget it, because things were going great. I had a good job. We had, things were just good. And I had relapsed, and I was breaking into my own home, taking stuff and selling it. And when I went to Nashville, I had to stay in a homeless shelter for a night with like 400 other homeless people.
Right.
And I'll never forget laying there and thinking that exact same thing. Is like, man, why do I keep doing this to myself? And just thinking about the people I hurt, you know, my family, and just like, what am I doing? Like, look where I'm at right now. And it was just crazy. And I believe that was Satan's last-ditch effort to kind of get me to just tap out and say, okay, this is just the way my life is. But and so that night, man, I'll always have in my mind. But yeah, you always have that regret, and it just amazes me how. That's why I think too it's all very important to remember those relapses and what it can do,
Sure.
because so easily we get some clean time and we forget, you know, what these drugs can do to us and our families, and it's just just never forget it. And
I know Susan has said because of us working together, we work together 2 days a week, and then of course being responsible position on the board and whatnot. The things that I hear her say so frequently is the structure. Is that anything that you feel is something that you embrace, or maybe have not embraced as much as you should?
not embraced as much as I should, but it is important. I think that's why when I go to a rehab and I get out, I do so well in a rehab because you have that routine and structure, and then you get out for a few months and you're doing the same thing, but eventually you don't have that counselor or whatever in your ear. But yeah, I still struggle with it today as far as like just getting into that structure where I'm doing this, like reading my Bible in the morning at this time, doing this, but it's very important. It's something I'm working on. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've heard her say that so many times, especially, in the office when she's talking with people and different things. And sometimes it's easy to say, yes, structure, but it's a lot harder. I would assume, I'm just looking at anybody's life. There's things maybe, and I know there are in my life, that is not as structured as it should be. And that can be Bible reading. That can be, my one-on-one time with the Lord, or, it could even be time with my husband. It doesn't make any difference that you take for granted, and then it ends up like, oh, I can get that later. I know for me, if when I have a routine when I get up of a morning, and if that routine, if I get, like this morning, my brother calls me, and I'm like, "Dad gone," but because I had in my mind how my day was going to go. Not that I didn't want to talk to my brother, but I also know that when that happens, that's going to throw me off. But then I also at that point have to look like, okay, now get back on it. It didn't go exactly the way you wanted it, but still incorporate something, that is structure. And I didn't say that, just to be flippant or whatever about, well, yeah, I'm not as structured as I can, but I was just wondering, is it a big struggle? And I'm assuming that it is. I think that's probably what we see a lot of people coming in, and when things don't change or, have changed in a way that's not to the positive, 9 times out of 10, it's because they've gotten out of that structure. There's a lot to be said, whether you're in addiction or you're not, of keeping some sort of structure.
So with your recovery now, you give back a lot. There's a couple things that you do in the community. If you want to share 2 different ministries, and which are vital ministries in the Richmond area. And my son was just on the previous show, and we talked about one of those ministries that really has been a big part of his life, and he enjoys it, and it helps. It kind of grows with him.
Yeah, my wife and I, we are involved with Upward. 2 years ago, we've kind of taken it over, and it's quite a challenge. But my son is 21 years old, and my wife don't have any kids, so we just love kids, and I want kids to feel loved and just special and just have fun, man. Because I had that at home, but outside of home, I just want kids to feel like they belong. So it's a great program because most of the coaches are Christian and they have kids, so they they're very understanding with the kids and just can relate with them. But that's a great program, and we've been involved with it for about 8 years now, and it just never gets old. I always look forward to the Upward program. But yeah, we share devotion at practice time with the kids and share the gospel, and we also have devotion cards as a memory verse that they get every couple weeks. So they're coming here and they're having fun, and they're also hearing about God. Mm-hmm. Our other ministry is the 10th Street Park Ministries. We've kind of taken a break from that now, being that we're doing Upward, but it'll pick back up afterwards. Just something I started. I went on a missions trip to Philadelphia to the projects there, and they kind of did the same thing, and it just kind of lit a fire under me. It was like, that would be awesome to do something like that in Richmond, just go around and just share the gospel with people and just help whoever we could, because Lord knows I was in some of their situations, man, and some people rejected me. I had churches just reject me, and it just blew me away. And so I don't want people to think about that. I don't want people to think like that about Christians. I don't want, some Christians have a bad name, and I don't like that. So I just go out there and just love on them, and if I can help them in any way. Even my wife is heavily involved. We serve a meal once a month, and our basement is like Walmart right now. We got soaps and deodorants and socks and clothes and stuff like that, just for anybody that needs it. So yeah, those are the 2 programs that we're involved with.
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure of being at 10th Street Park, and when you guys are doing the feeding, and always something, you try to have stuff for the kids. Mm-hmm. The kids get some candy or some little games. You feed everybody. There's clothing that I see that's dispersed, and usually try to have some kind of Bible reading or somebody up speaking, and I know that it's impacting people. And so with your recovery, you're giving back to people that once was you, right? Mm-hmm. And you're helping people that struggle, that have kids. Maybe you're helping that side too. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting to watch people give back and choose ministries to help, because that's a big part of our recovery.
Right.
I know today God's started Unchained Praises through me, and I couldn't see my life today without it, because it's a huge part of my life to just give back and to let people know that we're able to change. I think there's such a stereotype when it comes to drug addiction that we can lose ourselves, and we can lose ourselves even in recovery when it comes to just the monotony of the day, because it almost, you're on that roller coaster, you do all of this, and it's hard sometimes to keep that structure. And even though I encourage people do structure, because I know it's vital to myself, there's times that, okay, you were supposed to read and you didn't read, or journal. That's a big thing for me, is journaling, and I can tell when I haven't journaled that day, and I go about my day. It really does almost kind of knock me off, and it's hard sometimes pushing yourself back on that structure.
Right.
And that's how we learn it in recovery, and like inpatient facilities. And you talked about being in an inpatient facility, and it's harder when you get out of that inpatient facility, because you don't have the people that you can, if you're in an inpatient, you can go to an office or something. Right. There's usually somebody there. And so we have to learn, and when we're back out in the world, that we have to reach out and talk to people, and we have to get ourselves to a meeting. And so what kind of meetings do you do, or have you done in your recovery?
I've been involved with a program called Brianna's Hope on Monday nights. So I go there. It's kind of like a Celebrate Recovery type meeting. They serve a meal there. And when I can, I go to Celebrate Recovery here at, well, it's not here at Hillcrest no more. It's at
First United Methodist.
First United Methodist on Thursdays at 6:30.
Yes.
6:30. So those are my primary two meetings that I go to. But again, I am heavily involved with Upward right now, so I'm not able to go to those right now. But once Upward is over, then I'm going to get back into that routine.
And it shows that your life, as your recovery continues to grow, you implement different things. And you just keep growing with your recovery. And it's not about a meeting every day, 7 days a week, because we implement church and you implement giving back and you just implement more things than just the meeting things. And that shows growth to me. That shows a lot of growth in recovery is when we are changing with our recovery and we don't get stuck, because it's easy to get stuck in recovery too. And so, well, we have a few minutes more. Debbie, do you want to ask him anything?
Well, now you were pretty active in kind of a leadership capacity with CR at one point. Am I right on that?
I was involved with their step study and maybe was going to lead a step study.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I mean, I thought you were, you know. The one thing that I see also is, you know, you and Christy are just awesome. And, you know, that doesn't mean you're perfect, and it doesn't mean that you don't have struggles. And, but it does mean that you have a common goal, and that is the love of the Lord, and to be able to depend on each other. And, you know, when we have, each of us have those times in our lives when it isn't. But I'm just very blessed that there's our paths have crossed, and obviously in the church, but you know, I had you in drama once or twice, and then must have done you in because you said, that's it, I'm not doing that anymore. But I think you and Christy are both very giving people, and but I like the fact also that you want to be selective on what it is you are doing, and not just doing just for the sake of doing. And I admire that. That's a good thing.
Well, I want to thank Stan and Debbie for being on the show. As you heard Stan talk, he talked several times about relapse and what he did to pick himself back up. And so remember, if you have had struggle with a relapse, remember you do not have to go back to where you were. And that sobriety and recovery are two different things. Oftentimes we focus so much on the sobriety date that we lose focus on the recovery time and what we've learned and how we've changed. Going into a facility is much needed when it comes to recovery, because it gives us time to get away from maybe the area that we're from, or just time to concentrate on ourselves and to work through the pain and the hurt that we have caused others, and the hurt and the pain and the shame that we have caused ourselves, and just the devastation that addiction had done to our lives. And so we want to encourage you to choose recovery and to remember that our lives change when we put forth the effort to change our life, that there are other people around there to help us, but we ultimately have to do the work that it takes to change. And so we want to thank you for watching Let's Talk Recovery.